So, John Stockton made some very interesting comments about the current state of the NBA and what the Jazz are trying to do to get to a winning environment. Let's take a look at these video clips of Stockton, 3 video clips in total, and talk about what he believes.
Jazz Smack, NBA and Utah Jazz basketball.
So the first video clip is Stockton talking about the idea of load management and the players missing games. And let's take a look at this first video clip.
So you only missed 22 games in your entire career. How did you find the motivation to play on nights where you maybe were sick or just exhausted or injured? And how do you feel about the load management today and players who are missing more games in a season than you did in your entire 19 seasons combined?
I looked at it as a privilege and an honor to get to play every game. And I treated rat ball games the same way. Why do this if you're not going to lay it all out there? And I remember almost crying when I had to hear the national anthem, the first game that I missed, and it felt the same way the other ones. As for those guys, listen, they're being told by experts this, that, and the other thing. I think it's bad for the game. I think it's bad for them individually. The worst part about it is it's bad for the game, and it isn't bearing out where they're more healthy either.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think an athlete, you train yourself for the most extreme situations, which is 48 minutes, 4 games in 5 nights. You train yourself for that. And anything less is doing yourself a disservice. So I think it's a disservice from personal level all the way to organizational and fan level. It's awful.
So that's Stockton's first comment. And I totally agree with him on this, and I think the most of the fan base probably agrees with this as well. It's just really bad when players are missing games, and players aren't being forced to miss games in a lot of cases. I mean, players are sitting for this idea of load management. I mean, you could see it obviously with the Jazz. The Jazz are trying to intentionally lose games, so they're purposely sitting players. But from a fan's perspective, the fans have a big time commitment into both attending the games in person, whether you're traveling long distances to go to the arena. I mean, there's a lot of overhead in showing up and attending games in these arenas. But there's also a time commitment. You know, you're blocking out time to watch a game on television, whether you're doing that at home or maybe you're possibly going to, a sports bar or something like that with friends. You're kind of blocking out a lot of time to watch these games. Then when the players don't play, it's just really bad for the game. I mean, you're expecting to see such and such players play unless they're legitimately hurt with a legitimate injury. I mean, you can play through some discomfort. That's certainly the case. And it seems to me today there's much and much less of that. There are fewer players willing to play through discomfort, and they just want to sit out. And I think that's terrible for the game of basketball. I think it's terrible for the fans, and it's a sad situation. So I am totally on board with Stockton with this particular point. Let's take a look at the next clip.
Speaking of how the game has kind of changed since you've retired, especially the point guard position, do you feel like the game has changed for the better in the emphasis on 3-pointers, or how do you feel like you would have had to adjust your play style to today's basketball?
Well, everything's an adjustment. When I came out of college, I hadn't taken a 3-point shot. There were no 3-point shots until I was 23 years old. So there was never, we didn't have practices for it. We didn't have, the rebounding machines, none of the above. And yet we adapted and became where we could shoot those. Now I think it's a less attractive game. It's a less competitive game. It's a less of a gladiator game, which I think people miss. That's not to say there aren't great things about it. I know people love it. I want to see people lay it all out there and like gladiators and have it mean something to them. So that's my preference, but without ripping what's going on now.
Yeah.
So I agree with Stockton here as well. I purposely pulled this clip because I agree with this. I don't think the game as it's being played today is as exciting as it once was. I don't think it's as interesting as what from an intellectual standpoint, looking at from a basketball intellectual standpoint. I don't think the game is as interesting as it once was. It's still interesting to me. I'm obviously here commenting on the Utah Jazz, and I follow along. But is it as good as it once was? I don't think it is. I liked a lot of aspects of the old game. I like the post play. I like the mid-range game. I like the running of actual plays rather than these quote-unquote actions. I liked all that, and the game has changed, and it's always going to change. What we have today isn't going to be what we have in the future. It's going to change more. It's going to change again. Does it change? Does it revert? Does it shift back towards what it once was, or does it change in a new direction? That's yet to be seen, but it's always going to change. And Stockton's point was, yes, it's always going to change, but he doesn't enjoy it as much as he once did. And I agree with that. I liked the nature of the old game better. And, everybody has their opinion on that. I've heard arguments both ways that people love the 53 pointers a game being shot. Everybody has their opinion on that, but certainly you would think that Stockton would, kind of side with how it was played in the past during his era rather than how it's being played today. Let's take a look at one more clip of John talking about what it is that he likes or dislikes, and this one is specifically about the Utah Jazz.
So my last question for you is, do you still follow the Jazz today, and kind of what are your thoughts on their strategy right now and what they're doing?
I wouldn't say I follow them. I haven't seen a game, and it's not trying not to watch it. I still have 4 of my own children that are playing in various leagues around the world. So I have plenty of basketball, and I enjoy it. I still think it's the greatest game around. But I haven't been tracking. I know that there doesn't seem to be a mission to win, and that if that's true, that's frustrating because I think that culture is so hard to come by. I knew how hard it was for the Utah Jazz to become a winning organization to begin with, and I came in on the tail end of that, and I got to build from that with my teammates. But I wouldn't give up that fight to try to win every single game, every single quarter for anything, for draft choices, for future anything, because the future, it moves.
So as you would expect, Stockton is not a fan of tanking. He hates it. And I wouldn't expect him to say anything less than what he just said there, because the idea of purposely losing, that just is not in John Stockton's nature. And I don't think that he would had Jerry Sloan suggested that the Jazz should purposely lose, or Larry Miller told Jerry Sloan to purposely lose, and then Jerry Sloan told the team that they were going to purposely lose, I'm sure that Jerry Sloan would have quit. He would have just quit on the spot. He says, I'm not going to purposely lose. And I think John Stockton, Karl Malone, Jeff Hornacek, all those guys would have obviously been on it as well. Now, the Jazz were obviously in a much different situation back then because they were competing at a high level. Those last few years, they played in the NBA Finals twice. So the team dynamic was much different during Stockton's days playing with the Jazz because Stockton made the playoffs every year that he played. So they weren't in a situation where they were, struggling to get into, a 10th seed, because obviously there was no play-in back then either. It was the top 8, and that's all the only teams that went to the playoffs. There were no play-in. So the Jazz were in a much different situation. But again, the idea of purposely losing games, John Stockton being on board with that, like he said, whether it's a pickup ball game or whatever, just going out there and not competing, it would kill him. And from everything I've ever heard of him playing in those pickup games at Gonzaga, or these pickup games that he now does at the gym that he owns in in Spokane, that he's ultra competitive in those games as well, long after he was retired. So, I just can't imagine him ever dogging it. That's just not in his nature, and I would be shocked to ever hear him say anything otherwise. But anyway, I found these clips interesting, this interview interesting, and I would like to hear your thoughts below in the comments section. I mean, do you agree with Stockton, or do you disagree? And in what areas do you agree or disagree? Because, like I said, overall, I pulled these 3 clips purposely because I tend to agree with what he says, but obviously not everybody does, and it's always interesting to hear other people's thoughts. So please, if you are watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. You can also follow us on X at JazzSmack, and we will talk to everybody later.